What if I told you that a ragtag bunch of farmers, blacksmiths, and printers took on the most powerful empire in the world and won? What if I told you that revolution didn't just erupt over tea and taxes, but simmered for decades in taverns, in sermons, and in angry newspapers? This is the story of the American Revolution, not the sanitized version from your high school textbook, but the raw, messy, thrilling truth. This is hardcore history. Before Lexington, before Bunker Hill, before Washington crossed the Delaware, the fuse was already burning. The American colonies weren't born with rebellion in their blood. For over 150 years, they were mostly loyal subjects of the British Crown. They farmed, they traded, they prayed, they fought for Britain in her wars. But slowly, something began to change. Flashback, 1763. The 7 Years' War had just ended. Britain won, yes, but victory had a price tag, the size of a continent. The war nearly bankrupted the crown. And guess who they expected to help pay the bill? The colonies. Enter the Stamp Act of 1765. A simple tax on paper documents, but to colonists, it was a slap in the face. Not because they were cheap, but because they had no say in Parliament. No taxation without representation, they shouted. But Britain wasn't listening. What followed was chaos. Effigies burned in the streets, tax collectors tarred and feathered, merchants refused to import British goods. For the first time, Americans saw themselves not as Englishmen, but as something different, as patriots. Fast forward to 1773. The British East India Company was drowning in unsold tea. Parliament thought they were clever. Let them sell it cheap in the colonies and still sneak in a tax. Enter the Boston Tea Party, December 16, 1773. A group of men, some disguised as Mohawk warriors, boarded ships in Boston Harbor and dumped 342 chests of tea into the icy Atlantic. That wasn't a protest. That was an act of rebellion. The response? The coercive acts. Colonists called them the intolerable acts. The British shut down Boston's harbor, revoked Massachusetts' charter, and allowed troops to be quartered in private homes. To many, this felt like martial law, and it set the colonies on a collision course with war. April 19, 1775. The British marched to Concord to seize weapons. But waiting for them were armed colonists, militiamen, farmers, storekeepers, teenagers. No one knows who fired first, but once that first musket cracked, everything changed. Stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here. Captain John Parker, Lexington, Militia. By the end of the day, the British were retreating back to Boston, harassed all the way by colonial gunfire. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was war. In June 1775, the Second Continental Congress appointed a tall, soft-spoken Virginian named George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. Washington didn't ask for the job. He wasn't even the best military mind in the room. But he had grit and presence and a reputation for integrity. The Battle of Bunker Hill soon followed, a brutal, bloody standoff outside Boston. The British technically won, but at what cost? A few more such victories, said one British officer, and we shall be undone. The colonies were still torn. Many still hoped for peace. But then, in early 1776, a short pamphlet dropped like a bombshell. Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
It sold over 100,000 copies in just a few months. In a colony of 2.5 million, that's viral. Paine didn't just argue for independence, he demanded it. There is something absurd, he wrote, in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. Suddenly, the word independence was no longer treason. It was destiny.
July 4, 1776. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just a breakup letter, it was a philosophical nuke. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. The men who signed it were committing treason. If caught, they'd be hanged. But they believed in a cause greater than themselves, and they knew they were lighting a fire that could never be put out. The American Revolution wasn't just muskets and midnight rides. It was a civil war, a rebellion, a redefinition of what it meant to be free. It was messy, brutal, uncertain, and yet it gave birth to something completely new. A nation founded not on bloodlines or monarchies, but on ideas. This was just the beginning. In Part 2, we dive into the battles, the betrayals, and the birth of a new world power. This is Hardcore History. For more, like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.